Hello, and welcome back to another episode of I Demand a Homestead. And today we are going to be discussing um, how to plan a new vegetable garden, which is one of the most kind of exciting things you can think about. We've got my little friend Maya here who's decided to join us in the shot as well, and that's okay. What I wanted to talk about today is kind of how to start thinking about where to begin. This is the first kind of how to really get going on this stuff of trying to produce your own food. So, first thing you need to think about is how big a vegetable garden you want and where you want to put it. Generally, if you've never gardened before, a smaller garden is better than a larger one, so that way, if you decide you really don't like all that weeding or it's just not for you, then it's not such a large commitment. And that way you can always gradually expand, which is kind of the way we did it here. We kind of started off, if you saw the tour, you saw the small kind of little garden, which we later expanded. Don't mind the background noise. My husband's just fixing some stuff over there, which is great because he's doing all that work while I'm sitting here just filming. So we started small. You'll obviously maybe start a little bit smaller. They recommend probably about a 6 foot by 6 foot garden to start with if you haven't had one before and you've never tried it, or if you've had a garden before, you can start kind of bigger than that. And then the thing is to think about where you're going to put your garden. So the thing I recommend is obviously look and see where you've got space, and then kind of watch for where the sun goes in your yard. And you can kind of observe that, and then you can kind of see where the sun tracks throughout the day and where the shadows are. Because ideally, a vegetable garden is going to have about 8 to 10 hours of sunlight per day. You can get away with a little bit less than that. My Maya is going to come right in front of me here. You can get away with a little bit less than that. Our garden probably gets about 4 to 6 hours of sunlight per day. Hello, Maya. Which way you go? So we get a little bit less than that. So we don't get as much production as we might if we had a little bit more sunlight. But we don't have a lot of, because we have a lot of big trees, so we don't have a lot of areas that get more than that. So that was the best that we kind of could manage. So think about where you want to put it, where you have space, where the sun is, where the shadows come, okay? So that's important. The other thing to think about is whether or not you want to have like a on the level kind of garden, or whether you prefer to have raised bed gardens. We have kind of on the level gardens just because they're a little bit easier for us to do for a large garden. But the raised bed gardens, they're quite pretty. They're a little bit more work to get set up in the beginning because you need kind of whatever you're going to use, 4x4s or logs or whatever, and then you generally tend to kind of ship in topsoil. But once you get them set up, they're quite pretty. They also can be more productive because the temperature of a raised bed will increase faster in the spring, and so your plants tend to get going a little bit earlier. The other thing that is good is it can be a little easier to protect them from predators because they're off the ground, so you may not have to fence them as much. And you can also hear my chickens digging in the background. That's nice. Anyway, the other thing is so yeah, they're better because they warm up faster, because it's easier to protect them from predators, and also because you're not walking on the soil, because generally raised beds are kind of, they're more narrow, probably about 3-4 feet in width, kind of maximum. You don't walk on the soil generally, and so it doesn't get as compacted, which is great because the compaction seems to really reduce your yield. Again, we have a larger space, so we don't kind of have to worry about kind of mild losses in production. So we went for on the level garden because it was easier. And we kind of use something called back to Eden gardening kind of technique, which I will post a link to in the description. So what that basically is you don't have to bring in a whole bunch of topsoil. You basically you don't have to turn over your grass or cut the sod out, basically all you do is you take either some cardboard, so it's a great use for all those boxes that you got shipped online to you. Generally not cardboard that has tons of dyes and colors on it, but the plain stuff. And so you just open those up, you lay them on the ground, so you could just kind of lay them down, and then you kind of use them to mark out where your garden is going to be. And then what you do then is you either get a load of just hardwood mulch. The other thing that we normally do is we will, in the fall, we mulch up all of our leaves and we put that on top of our gardens. So if you had cardboard down here, and then you put a layer of probably 4 to 6 inches of mulch, whether that's hardwood mulch or leaves or a combination of both, and then you leave it. You do that in the fall or as soon as you can in the summertime, and that will be ready to plant in by the following spring, which is great. And so it's really kind of low maintenance. It makes it really easy to kind of start a new garden. And I'll kind of post a link to the fellow who really kind of pioneered that idea. The videos are, they're quite inspirational about kind of how he got stuff to grow in an area that was basically quite arid, and so it's pretty darn impressive. And then what we do every year to kind of build the nutrition in our soil is, again, we will just put more mulched leaves on it every year. Oh, and the other thing I meant to mention is that we also do something called no-till. Back in kind of the old days, and probably for some people now, they felt that they needed to turn the soil over every year in order to access more nutrients and also to break up weeds. What we've actually found is that you don't need to do that, which cuts down on the work tremendously, which is great. Another good thing, right? So if I don't have to till in the spring, all I need to do is move the mulch out of the way and then I plant right in it, which is great. And by not tilling, for one thing, you actually don't disturb any kind of the fungus that are growing there. They have mycelium that kind of spreads out underneath the mulch, and that's actually kind of decaying the mulch. And the mycelium has actually been found to be really, really positive, and helps the plants grow. They kind of have a symbiotic relationship, which is great. So, and then the other thing I was going to say is you also don't disturb any earthworms, and they're also going to be important for decaying that mulch and bringing those nutrients back down into the soil where the plants can access them. So then that's kind of the summary of thinking about what kind of garden do you want? Do you want a raised bed? Do you want a kind of just on the level bed? I recommend no-till gardening. I recommend highly mulching, because then you don't have to always be bringing in more and more kind of fresh soil, because that's going to add to your soil. You can also put compost on it as well. And then think about where you're going to locate your garden based on where you have space and where the sun kind of goes in your yard. And then plant it now, plant it in the summertime, and get going on it so that way it's ready to plant come the spring. And then we can talk a little bit more about kind of what you plant, where you plant it. And that's probably going to be our next segment about choosing what to plant. All right, so thank you very much for coming along for another episode of I Demand a Homestead, and we will see you next time.